So the RTX 3060 says to the 2070, I'm better than you are because I'm newer and I take less power. And the RTX 2070 says, holy crap, a talking graphics card. So I was lucky enough to have the opportunity or win the opportunity to purchase the Gigabyte RTX 3060 on Newegg. I got that with the Gigabyte motherboard that I just got done reviewing, the X570 motherboard. Pretty decent motherboard. Looking for the same out of the video card. I've seen a couple of reviews on this already. Already know kind of what to expect as far as quality and the way it looks, and even so much a little bit kind of know what to expect as far as head-to-head between this and the 2070 that I mentioned a little while ago. I will be doing some benchmarks between them. Some of these benchmarks, I'm not concerned like with gameplay. If I'm doing, there's a couple of them that don't have an automatic benchmark, like Cyberpunk does not, and Control does not. So I ran around in the same area, and it's not so much to see what the performance will be, if it's good or bad. I'm simply comparing the two cards together to see how much the difference is. And so I'm running in the same area, even though there's not a lot of stuff going on, it still gives me a good comparison of how closely they will match with each other. So the other ones are the other ones like Borderlands and Shadow of the Tomb Raider and all that stuff do have their own benchmarking tools, so I'll go through that. This has 3 fans on the front of it. It does have the pass-through design where you can the airflow will go through part of the card, through the grill. There are 2 HDMI and 2 DisplayPort on the back. And the fans on the front, the first and third fan spin in one direction. I believe it's clockwise. And the other one spins counterclockwise. That's just to kind of create that airflow, keep from making too much noise, and to just make sure that some airflow gets across the fan itself. Overall, it's a pretty solid design, and I'm going to go ahead and test it in my editing rig. I've already done benchmarks up to this point with the 2070, and I've had to go back and rerun a bunch of those just to make sure they're current. And I'm going to doing the same thing again with the 3060, so we'll get a good idea of how they compare head-to-head in the modern, the benchmark that I've got right now. So the test setup, we're going to go ahead and go with the Asus Prime X570 motherboard. It has, obviously the video cards will be different, but it's got a 3700X AMD Ryzen 7 processor. It is set up with 32 gig of Corsair Vengeance RAM. I believe it's running at 3600. If that's different, I'll put that on the screen, but I'll post up here what everything is in it. And then the Corsair power supply, I believe it's a 750 watt RM750 or something like that. I don't know if there's anything else I'm missing on here. The 2 drives, I've got a couple of NVMe drives that we'll be putting on here to make sure that the speed of everything else involved is not going to affect these 2 cards at all. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and take a look at it, and here we go. All right, so we are taking the Gigabyte RTX 3060 Gaming OC 12 gigabyte. It's got 12 gig of VRAM as opposed to the RTX 2060 that we're going to test that has 8 gig. Sorry about that. We're going to put them head to head. It's an EVGA card. That's not important so much as what the card is. The reason why the RTX 3060s, one of the reasons why I have a Gigabyte card is because they don't make like a Founders Edition card. All of them are through board partners, so I was lucky enough to pick up this one, and that's what when we went ahead and tested everything on. Putting it head to head with them, we're going to start with Shadow of the Tomb Raider. And right away you see that these 2 cards are pretty evenly matched, and especially in the 1080p, very, very close. I went ahead and measured these. Shadow of the Tomb Raider does have RTX on and DLSS on at the same time. They're not individually selectable, so you'll see the high and highest, 1080p high and highest, and then RTX. This is almost, I don't want to say almost as cluttered as it's going to get. There's 1 or 2 more that will be a little bit, but kind of bear with me. I'm going to try to keep these as clean as possible. The RTX 2070 is always going to be the orange one. The RTX 3060 is always going to be the blue one. And then I'll divide them up into 1080p and 1440 with at least 2, sometimes 3 quality settings in between. So Shadow of the Tomb Raider, you can see that they're pretty evenly matched. They're closer than I would have thought when I started this. I was expecting there to be a large difference, and in some cases, I mean, they're neck and neck. They're within, they're within the margin of error, and really, really close. So then we go to Borderlands 3, and you start to see a little bit of something that I wasn't expecting, and that's the 3060 actually being ahead of the RTX 2070. Now, I did not expect anything like this because everything I've seen so far leads me to believe that that 2070 ought to really just outperform it in every single case, and it's turning out not to be that way. I did select DX11 for this. There is a DX12 setting, but the DX11 was actually faster than DX12, so that's the reason why I chose that for these tests. So we're moving on to Dirt 5. There's really only high and ultra with Dirt 5, and I tested it both ways, and except for one, except for the 1440p Ultra, the 2070 fell a little bit behind the RTX 3060. So we're starting to see a little bit of a pattern here. It's really performing pretty well. Now, there's been a lot of comparisons to the RTX 3060 to both the, or I should say, further generations back, like the RTX 2060 and the 2070 Super, but I haven't really seen that many of them go head-to-head with a 3060 and a 2070, and I'm a little bit surprised, and I'm wondering why more people didn't do this. We're looking at Far Cry 5, and again, they're pretty much within margin of error. They're almost, I mean, they are dead even in 1440, so it's, I mean, really, really hard to tell the difference between the two. And quite frankly, just playing, I would never be able to tell if I wasn't looking in the box. Control actually sees a little bit of a heads up for the RTX 3060. It did better in the 1080p, and it hung right there in the 1440. I was really kind of surprised with this as well. I was able to select RTX by itself and DLSS by itself, but there unfortunately is no higher setting. It's just low, medium, and high, so I went ahead and picked high for this. In Metro Exodus, this is where it gets just a little bit confusing, but again, I did 1080p on the front, on the top, and 1440 on the bottom. You can see the highs, then RTX, then with DLSS, and then the Extreme, which is actually 2 steps above. So it has a high, an ultra, and extreme, but I didn't, there's just not enough room, and it would be way too cluttered if I tried to do the ultra and the extreme along with it. So I just gave you the high setting, which a lot of people were going to play on, and the extreme, which is the very top of it, and you can kind of see how they compare. Again, neck and neck. They're very, very close, and it's hard, you're hard pressed to be able to tell the difference in the two. And then finally, we're looking at Cyberpunk 2077. And for this, I did just the RTX reflections. I didn't do lighting, and DLSS on auto. So you can really see where the deep learning super sampling, the version 2.0, is doing a good job, because the ray tracing does knock it down quite a bit in all cases, but the DLSS picks it right back up, and you're not losing a whole lot of performance. And in some cases, you're gaining a little bit. And then the 1440, you're actually gaining a little. So kudos to that process. But also, both of these cards performed, I mean, pretty well. I was already familiar with what the 2070 would do, but I have to admit, I'm very, very impressed with the 3060 itself. So yes, I was all prepared to be butthurt over having to like settle for this card instead of being able to get a 3060 Ti or a 3070 or something like that. But after putting the two of them head to head, I mean, usually my 2070, when it's under a heavy workload, it'll hit 72, maybe 73 degrees sometimes, but stays pretty, I mean, overall, pretty cool. I don't have to worry about it or anything like that. It usually just levels off or stays, you know, high 60s, low 70s. This thing never got above 65 degrees. And I mean, and I pushed it. I mean, benchmark after benchmark after benchmark, and she never went above 65. Not even in games like Borderlands 3, which will make this one jump up to 72, 73. So I'm surprised. That's all I can say. And yes, I double checked the benchmarks. I went back over them, and I in some cases I was thinking, there's just no way. So, and I know that overall, this card is probably a little bit more powerful than this card. This card does take a little bit more power, more electricity, and more wattage than this card does. But putting them side by side and playing them at the same time or playing them back to back, you'd be hard pressed to tell which one was which. My overall impression of this card, I'm pretty damn happy I ended up having to buy it. I was looking for a GPU for a number of reasons. One, I'm doing a build. Second, I need another GPU. And to get the opportunity to buy it, first of all, I was pretty lucky, I think, but that luck's going to get a little bit better because it looks like GPUs are coming back down in price again, which is great. It's awesome. But am I happy that I spent as much as I did on this? No. But in the end, it cost me about the same thing this one did 2 years ago. And guess what? It's pretty much the same performance out of both of them. And I really, really didn't think I'd be saying that. So that's my conclusion, folks. The Gigabyte 3060, RTX 3060, you know what? I'd have a hard time saying no. And if you can get a hold of one of them for MSRP or close to it or in some type of deal or whatever, then I would say do it. Don't hold back. Now, if you can get something like a 3060 Ti or 3070 or whatever for, you know, around the same price or that MSRP, then I would probably do that first. But if all you can get a hold of is a card like this, do it. That's it. That's my thought about it. So don't forget, folks, if you liked the video, go ahead and throw a like on it. If you didn't, you can put a dislike, but tell me why. Don't forget to hit subscribe and follow me on the other socials. I'm really in a conundrum right now. Conundrum not related to the conundrum, worldwide conundrum. I'm really trying to think right now. I have a blog on buymeacoffee.com. You're welcome to go there and visit. But I'm wondering if I should make that into a tech type blog instead of non-tech related. So if you guys have any comments or you've seen that page or anything like that, or you've read through there, tell me what your thoughts are, because I'm really trying to figure out which way to go with that blog. And you know, who knows? And while you're there, hey, don't forget, you can buy me a coffee. $5 goes a long way. You know, it helps me buy stuff like this that otherwise I probably wouldn't have been able to. Anyway, that's all I got for right now. So please, if you will, visit me on the other socials. And until next time, I'll see you later. I am not done with this card though.